Dance uses math for many, many aspects of what we do. Certain things require geometry. So we use geometry when we are talking about our shapes for like floor patterns or different formations that we have with our bodies and things like that. This can also be applicable to like our lines of travel. So if we're standing in one spot, we can make circles around ourselves. We need to understand how we're making our way around the circumference. We can also do triangles. We can also make big circles in a group. We talk about our personal squares and how we square off and what those angles are. In which case, then we're talking about some of our 45-degree angles and how our leg reaches the floor. We can even use those angles to talk about our arms. They can also be our line of direction if we need to take a 45-degree angle in our upper body to rotate, or if we need to head at a 45-degree angle. We talk about angles a lot. 90 degrees is another common one. We talk about right angles. That is often the case when we start talking about our ground butt mods. That's our first goal, is to have a pretty clean 90-degree angle. That's also, again, line of travel, understanding where your audience is squared off in front of you versus if you turn 90 degrees to the side and you have a different direction that you're now facing. We also talk about 135-degree angles, so now we have our obtuse angles. That comes into play when we start working on higher extension work. Again, each of these angles also come into play with our line of directions. We can also talk about lines moving side to side across the stage. We can go forward or backwards in our lines. We also have diagonals. We can practice pyramid shapes and different types of quadrilaterals and things of that nature. So shapes are kind of endless in our possibilities and how we can use them. We can also make figure eights. We can expand on this and understand more blocking when we have multiple people and do V formations, or we can double that up and do a W formation and talk about the angles of if we want that wider or tighter together. So math plays a pretty important part in what we do. For anybody who does costume designs, you're going to be using math skills all the time. Quite honestly, using things like figuring out circumference or radius, diameter is often used for making skirts. That's how we'll do a lot of circle skirts. We also need to be able to understand measurements in those regards, so we can take costume measurements and size up for our leotards and tights and things like that. So being able to measure is a huge thing for dancers in general, and like I said, anybody working on costumes. Even more so, anyone who works in the lighting that we use for dance. Now you're going to start talking about cosine and more of your algebra type work, because you have to talk about the distance of the light you're throwing. If you're working on sound, then you're talking about ohms. So there's a whole variety of mathematical things that we need to be able to understand, and it depends on what direction you head. With some of that, you also start talking more about your electrical work, which can be applied with school. You need to be able to understand some of your AC voltage and DC and how that all pans out and mathematically compute things there as well. And granted, that is a different tangent than what we just do from a dance perspective. But if it weren't for people studying those subjects, we wouldn't have anybody to give us light. We wouldn't have anybody to give us sound. We wouldn't have anybody mathematically computing how the rig is set up for being able to bring sets in and out and all of that stuff. So math is pretty important. I will see you tomorrow as we talk about counting and music. I will see you then.